Tonight, recovered looted funds are returned to state, Accountant General tells House Committee, as he is grilled alongside Attorney General of the Federation over alleged missing funds. Attacks on police stations in the southeast continue. 4 policemen killed in Enugu State as police repel attempt on another station in Imo State. Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee votes to retain all key rates, says move is to deepen economic growth following the nation's exit from recession. And political uncertainty in Mali as the country's military arrests president and prime minister over alleged move to sabotage transition plan, plus business, sports news from Abuja, and later international news from our London studio. Contrary to what has been in the public space, the Accountant General of the Federation says the Ebonyi loot was paid to Delta State. He says recoveries are made by the federal government on behalf of states and insists that any recovery arising from looted funds from a particular state go directly to the states. He stated this when he appeared before the House Committee on Recovered Loot. Meanwhile, the committee is querying an allegedly missing €5 million from the recovered funds by the federal government. Our correspondent, Terry Ikumi, reports.
The Attorney General and Accountants General of the Federation honor the summons of the House Committee on Recovered Loots after failing to appear the previous day. Former chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Ibrahim Magu, is also in attendance. The Attorney General begins by explaining that there are agreements surrounding internationally recovered loots.
On account of the fact that Nigeria, as a sovereign nation, is not exclusively involved where international recoveries are concerned, it calls for mutual negotiations and determination.
On local recoveries, he says a database has been created.
We have what is, established in the Office of the Attorney General Asset Recovery and Management Unit, sanctioned by the head of service and established on that account. And a database has indeed been established that captures the desired information relating thereto.
The lawmakers query a ₦2 billion payment for prosecution of terrorism suspects from the recovery accounts.
Where the money comes from is a function of the Federal Ministry of Finance, and I'm not making specific requests out of the recovered assets.
His attention is then drawn to a document from the central bank, but he insists that there is nothing to show that it originated from his office.
It says request for approval to effect critical payment in respect of Federal Ministry of Justice from the recovered, which means the Attorney General knows that this is coming from the recovered funds, which means that the Attorney General knows that he's making a request that is against the law.
There is nothing either in the title, indicating a previous correspondence from the Office of the Attorney General. Neither is there anything in the opening paragraph making reference to a letter from the Office of the Attorney General.
The federal government. The Accountant General, on his part, is questioned on a missing document showing €5 million, which has not been submitted to the committee, as well as €6.1 billion paid into an account in the Office of the National Security Advisor, operated by the EFCC, which has been denied by the NSA.
Why is it not in the ledger submitted to this committee? Your balance of account different. Your ledger report to this committee, why is it not reflecting that euro, that €5 million, why is it not reflecting in the ledger submitted to this committee?
Well, this is what I was telling you. Reconciliation is always there, and all accountants will attest to that. We will update you. By tomorrow, you will get full position.
EFCC officers attached to NSA office, keeping a separate recovery account. No, I mean, if you're working for EFCC, no matter where you are you allowed to operate an account where you're different from the EFCC account, and the NSA is unaware of the recovery account?
On the issue of recovered loots, the Accountant General boldly insists that the Ebonyi loot was paid to Delta State.
Let's give an example. I mean, there's something trending, the recovery of Ebonyi loot. Where will it be paid into?
It was paid to the state. Is it Delta or Delta State? It was paid to Delta State.
But that's contrary to the information that it was used for specific
any
budgeting?
recovery, Honorable Chair, Honorable Committee, any recovery that is, arising from looted funds from a particular state goes to the state.
The lawmakers are also concerned that loans were given to agencies from the recovery accounts, especially for items which were already provided for in the budget. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the Accountant General provided answers to some of those questions, admitting that there were instances where agencies received loans from the recovery account and are expected to pay back. He was, however, unable to state clearly if the loans had been repaid. In the meantime, the AGF says no extra budgetary loans have been given to any agency.
Under some critical conditions, I know we do borrowings. And when we borrow, we state clearly it is borrowing. It's normal, and even though I cannot tell you specifics because I don't have the exact figure to tell you, I am not aware of any extra budgetary borrowing. I am not aware of extra budgetary borrowing out not within the appropriation. I'm not aware.
I asked you, the borrowed fund, was it refunded?
I know at different times we made representation to the then Honorable Minister of Finance to the effect that some of these borrowings need to be provided for in the budget and paid for. And as far as I know, this in particular, or that 23 in particular, which is tagged as borrowing, I cannot conclude here that it has been paid.
To security matters now, 4 police officers have been killed by gunmen in an attack on Iwolo Police Division in Eziago local government area of Enugu State. The State Commissioner of Police, Mohammed Ndatsu Aliyu, who visited the scene of the attack, says the hoodlums invaded the police station at about 4 in the morning and opened fire on operatives but were resisted in the gun duel. Mr. Aliyu explains that unfortunately 4 of the officers were killed and the station burnt down by the attackers. The police commissioner has ordered an investigation into the incident, insisting the perpetrators must be found. He appeals to residents to promptly volunteer useful information that will assist the command in the ongoing investigation. It will be the second time hoodlums are attacking police stations and government facilities in the state. The first was a divisional police station in Adani, in Uzowani local government area, with police officers killed. Meanwhile, the police in Imo State earlier today engaged hoodlums in a shootout in the Oji area of Owerri, the Imo State capital. Residents of the area are said to have scampered for safety, while security around prisons and government house were immediately beefed up as all adjoining roads in the area were cordoned off. Meanwhile, some hoodlums also launched an offensive on the reconstruction site of the Oji Divisional Police Station, which was earlier burnt by hoodlums during the End SARS protest last year. Before the arrival of a reinforcement team, the hoodlums melted into the neighboring township areas, abandoning their operational vehicles. A State Commissioner of Police, Mr. Abutuyaro, led an enforcement team to the scene where 5 suspects were arrested. Reactions already trailing yesterday's statement from the presidency ordering the reactivation of grazing reserves, the latest coming from the Benue State government, describing the move as not only shocking and curious, but also a misplaced priority. A statement by Governor Samuel Otom's chief press secretary says the presidency's action calls for worry at a time the country is experiencing worsening security situation and many Nigerians are calling for national dialogue to address the fundamental issues that have led to the present state of affairs. The statement reads in part, "It is now clear that there is a hidden agenda which only the presidency knows. As it stands, the presidency is the lone hand pushing for the continuation of open grazing and the return of cattle routes of 1950s and 60s. The presidency has, by its endorsement of open grazing, emboldened armed herders who lay claim to all lands in Nigeria as belonging to Fulani, hence the invasion of farming communities and killing of original owners of such lands. The statement adds that the governors from the northern and southern regions of the country have agreed at different times that the current system of herding, mainly by open grazing, is no longer sustainable in view of growing urbanization and population of the country. The fact must be established, he says, that grazing reserves or cattle routes are no longer tenable in the 21st century when Nigeria's population far exceeds that of the 50s, at a time these routes were contemplated, noting that Benue State has embraced ranching as the viable alternative to open grazing, and there is no going back on their resolve. The presidency is calling on the international community to support Chad to conclude the proposed 18-month transition from military to democratic governance in a peaceful manner. President Muhammadu Buhari made the call at the opening of the extraordinary summit of heads of state and government of the Lake Chad Basin Commission. The meeting was convened to discuss the recent developments in Chad after President Idris Deby Itno died on the front lines while defending the territorial integrity of his country. Our correspondent, Gloria Mezuki, reports.
President Muhammadu Buhari and other heads of state and government of the Lake Chad Basin Commission, including the Central African Republic, Chad, Niger, Cameroon, and the chairman of the Presidential Council of Libya, converged in Abuja for an extraordinary summit for the first time in Nigeria.
It is my honor.
The opening of the summit, chaired by Nigeria's president, pivoted on the raging insecurity crisis in the African region, particularly the urgent need to support the transition framework in Chad to halt further spread of conflicts.
It must be stated that the sanctity of the Chadian constitution is the supreme guiding document defining the social contract in the country must be respected.
Speaking through the lens of the situation in Chad, the chair of leaders of the LCBC member countries identified the wider implication for other countries.
Unrestrained flow of arms, drugs, and other harmful substances would further compound the security and stability of our areas and neighboring countries.
For the first time, the Lake Chad Basin Commission is holding an enlarged extraordinary summit to include observers from Sudan, African Union Commission, as well as the Economic Community of West African States. The summit, which broke to continue behind closed doors, reconvened after over 2 hours with a resolution which mandates the Nigerian president to appoint a special envoy to Chad.
In their resolve to remain seized of the situation in Chad and indeed in the entire region, mandated the chairman of the Summit of Heads of State and Government to appoint a special envoy to Chad to monitor developments and work with partners with similar initiatives to support the transition process.
To further crystallize efforts towards achieving peace and stability, including security in the African region, which is central at this summit, the president has called on the international partners, including the United Kingdom and the EU, to help support Chad's transition within the allotted 18 months period. From Abuja, Gloria Umezuki, Channel Television News.
In part two, after the break, Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee leaves all key rates unchanged, says move is to deepen economic growth. Stay with us. Welcome back. If you just joined us, watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Recovered looted funds are returned to State, Accountant General tells House Committee as he is grilled alongside Attorney General of the Federation over alleged missing funds. Attacks on police stations in the southeast continue. 4 policemen killed in Enugu State as police repel attempt on another station in Imo State. Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee votes to retain all key rates, says move is to deepen economic growth following the nation's exit from recession. And political uncertainty in Mali as the country's military arrests president and prime minister of alleged move to sabotage transition plan. Police authorities in Ebonyi State have debunked reports of an alleged suicide bombing in Afikpo area of the state, noting that the explosion happened as one of its officers accidentally detonated a hand grenade tied to his waist. A spokesperson for the command, Loveth Oda, says the victim was rushed to hospital where he was pronounced dead. Before the clarification by the police, there had been reports of a failed suicide bombing attack in the state.
Hand grenade is actually popularly known as tear gas. He hung it on his belt, and in the process, his hand hit on it forcefully from the top, and the thing exploded and wounded him. There's no suicide bombing. There's no explosion in Ebonyi. It was as a result of an accidental discharge of a hand grenade that killed the mobile police who was handling it.
The Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee has voted to keep its interest rates unchanged for the fourth time since September 2020, citing the fragility of Nigeria's economy. The governor of the CBN, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, who made the announcement at the end of the two-day rates decision meeting of the MPC in Abuja, said the committee voted to leave MPR at 11.5%, cash reserve ratio at 27.5%, and liquidity ratio at 30%. Mr. Emefiele explained that the move is expected to allow further economic growth after the country exited recession in the fourth quarter of 2020 amid rising inflation.
Every 8 weeks, the 10-member Monetary Policy Committee is faced with three choices: to tighten, hold, or loosen in determining an appropriate stance for policy in the short to medium term. Again, it has unanimously chosen to hold.
The choice, therefore, was between loosening the stance of policy to ease credit further, or tighten to moderate price development, or maintain a hold stance in order to allow previous policy measures to continue to permeate the economy while observing global and domestic developments. Based on the above considerations, the MPC made the decision to hold all policy parameters constant.
As of April of 2021, the country's inflation rate eased by 18.12%, while its GDP increased by 0.51%, driven mostly by agriculture and industry. According to the CBN governor, the liquidity mop-up is yielding results.
The twin problems confronting the Nigerian economy and that must be addressed relates to stagflation caused by rising inflation, with output, in this case GDP, contracting at the same time.
The CBN is maintaining its ban on cryptocurrency transactions in Nigerian banks, and despite calls from governors seeking further deferment on payment of bailout loans, the CBN governor stands his ground.
Those who invented crypto said it is encrypted. When they say it is encrypted, it means that whatever is happening between me and you is only known to the two of us. And you know what? In case I defraud you, because it's encrypted, you can't even disclose my name. You can't even get your money back. That is not what a responsible central bank will support. On this issue of state government, they're going to pay their loans. Banks have written to finance, and they have copied me that they want their money. If it was a bilateral loan agreement, in fact, there's privacy of contract here. I'm not part of it, so they should pay their loans.
That will come to the end of this press
The MPC is also asking that the federal government tackle insecurity immediately, stating its adverse effects on the war against inflation in the country. The MPC has also asked that the federal government ensure that 70% of the Nigerian population are vaccinated against COVID-19 if the country is to make any form of economic recovery. Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
Joining us now is Chief Executive Officer for National Derivatives Company, Mr. Bismarck Rewani. Thank you for joining us tonight. And I know that you have been following the discussion, you followed the meeting anyway, and you probably know more than we do at this point about the discussions they held behind the scene. So a sluggish recovery, slowing inflation, these are the things that made the MPC maintain status quo. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, this was a good move. No other time has status quo be more justified than this. The arguments were well marshaled, and quite frankly, we understand the reason for this. However, what happened at the meeting is not as important as what happened before the meeting. Three things happened. One, the exchange rate was virtually harmonized and put on the path of the exchange rate path, real effective exchange rate path. In other words, the official exchange rate, the multiple exchange rate practices has been actually converged somewhat. And that's a great move. I had respectively disagreed with the policies before now, but now they've done it. And it also brings the fact for everybody to know that if you adjust the currency, it does not kill the economy. And that's what the central bank has done. And you can see that there was a 7% adjustment, and actually the parallel market stayed static. Therefore, the difference between the parallel market rate and the official rate, which is NAFEX rate, has actually compressed together, and that's what we economists have been looking for all along. Secondly, interest rates have been allowed to increase, therefore increasing the marginal propensity to save, and that is good for investment. Thirdly, the central bank alluded to the fact that the banking system is sound in spite of the fact that it was the non-performing loans were 0.1% higher than the threshold. So in all respects, the primary mandate of price stability was being addressed. The question of the exchange rate alignment was being addressed for external balance and the banking system. In addition to that, there are the intervention programs, the anchor borrowers program and all those things, which are positive. So for most economists, this was a good day in terms of moving in the right direction. Now,
yeah, for most economists, of course, and of course, you would understand that. But to the common man out there, he's wondering how these indicators translate to what is in his pockets and what goes out of his pockets.
Yes, the reality is that no pain, no gain without pain, right? So in the short run, there might be some adjustments, right? But those things need to be done. If not for some of those adjustments and some of those policies, the economy would have been the economy is still shackled. The growth is still fragile. The economy, the inflation is slipping, just sliding slightly. And it's going to increase again because of the planting season logistics. But the ordinary man is still facing, if you look at the basket of goods, you find that all of them, especially onions and pepper, onions is up 66%, pepper is up 150%. But all others are pretty within range. Yeah. So for now, you are facing the pass-through effect on prices, the excess liquidity in the system, and also insecurity affecting the output, at least in the food-producing belt of the Benue and northeast region of the country. So that's the first thing. Secondly, that you find that because of the exchange rate convergence, there'll be more liquidity, foreign exchange liquidity. And once the central bank begins to release those monies into the system, even though the reserves will come down slightly, you'll find that output will increase. And once output increases, prices come down. So towards the end of this year, you are going to see a tapering of inflation. And also, in the second quarter of this year, because the growth in the first quarter was 0.5%, for the year, we expect 2.5% for the entire year. Now, because last year, this time, when the lockdown was in the second quarter of last year, we had a contraction of -6%. The base year effect will ensure that the growth in the second quarter is going to come in at about 4%, which is as a result of the fact that last year was a difficult year, and this year is going to be better. Right?
Yeah, and I think Nigerians will be happy to hear that, but then this also translates to where the people can put their money, to get real value out of it. So what impact will they have, on everybody else apart from just ordinary Nigerians?
Well, first and foremost, the workers will struggle because we're going to have to adjust the electricity tariff, minor tariff adjustment in July. We are going to, whether we like it or not, we are going to have to do without the subsidies before the end of the year. Before the end of the year, we are also going to have some adjustments. The exchange rate adjustment is also some amount of money coming out of your pocket. But what do you get? You get the revenue profile of the government will improve. People will be asking for better accountability of how government uses money and how it will have an impact on the infrastructure. That is, and like the MPC said, you must deal with the security, you must deal with the vaccination, you must interact and ensure that Nigeria's integration with the rest of the global economy does well. Nigeria will be raising $3 billion in the Eurobond market. The diaspora bonds are going to be issued. So generally speaking, the hard part has been done. I won't say the easy part is coming, but now the benefits begin to trickle in the second, third, and more so the third and fourth quarter, not in the second quarter.
Well, I think a lot of people will be really happy to hear that. With all the excuse me, insecurity that you have already mentioned, which highly impacted on the economy this year, but the COVID-19 pandemic, which really, really impacted on the economy and everybody else. Thank you again, Mr. Bismarck Rewani. Always a pleasure learning from you at this table. When the news at 10 returns, at least 20 persons are killed following an outbreak of cholera in Ebonyi State. Plus, the NNPC signs agreement with contractor partners for development of OML 118 Bonga Field. We'll have more in business news. Join us again. Welcome back. The Nigerian Press Organization, comprising the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria, the Nigerian Guild of Editors, and the Nigerian Union of Journalists, has also lent its voice to the current security, political, and economic challenges confronting the country. The press organization says it is concerned that an implosion is imminent if the current situation is not addressed. The media leaders therefore suggest, among other things, the devolution of power to the component units by implementing the El Rufai Committee reports, which recommends state policing, among others. They also want government to implement the Orosanye report, which provides a veritable roadmap for arresting the unsustainable high cost of governance. Passage of the Petroleum Industry Bill, which they say has gone into our history as the longest bill to ever go through legislative processes, and the need to avoid excessive borrowing. The Nigerian Press Organization also appealed to politicians and state actors to minimize the inflammatory rhetoric to reduce tension and ease a growing sense of fear among people. They reaffirmed their belief in the oneness of Nigeria, noting that it has innumerable advantages if resources are well managed and not sacrificed on the altar of ethnic or tribal chauvinism. Let's toss it over now to Linda in Abuja for more on the news at 10. Hi, Linda.
Hello, Amarachi. An outbreak of cholera disease has killed at least 20 people in Ebonyi State, with another 322 still infected. The State Commissioner for Health, Dr. Aliyu Megoro, gave the figures today while briefing newsmen on the epidemic. A rapid response team has been activated and isolation centers set up in all the general hospitals of the affected local government areas, while 4 cholera treatment units have also been activated in Ebonyi metropolis.
We had a total of 322 reported cases of diarrheal diseases, and then out of these 322, we lost almost 20 patients, bringing case fatality rate to almost 6.2. So, however, we have to differentiate. Not every diarrheal diseases is a cholera. However, some of the out of the samples collected, some are reported to be Vibrio cholera. So, based on the epidemiological pattern and the clinical diagnosis, the physicians and the response team, they are aware of the case definition, and we have been following this event very closely.
Rivers State Governor Nyesom Wike says his administration would not agree to any form of judicial autonomy if it will give the judiciary the right to physically present and defend its own budget before the State House of Assembly. Governor Wike made this clarification during a valedictory ceremony in honor of the outgoing Chief Judge of the state, Justice Adama Iyaye Laminkara, the second woman to serve in that capacity since the creation of the state. He says allowing the judiciary to independently present its budget is usurping the constitutional powers of the executive to plan and implement the state's expenditure.
After attaining the mandatory 65 years of age, the 8th Chief Judge of Rivers State is buried out of service. In line with the judicial ethics and procedures, a valedictory ceremony is held to formally say goodbye as her qualities are extolled by various speakers.
Mandibula was known to have demonstrated judicial courage by accepting, conducting and concluding matters assigned to him in faithful obedience to his judicial oath to administer justice to all manner of persons without fear or favor, affection or ill will.
During his lordship's tenure, His Excellency, the Governor of Rivers State, constructed and provided residential accommodation for all judges of the Rivers State origin.
The retiring judge, who hails from Edo State, describes her appointment into the Rivers State judiciary 5 years ago as miraculous.
The thought of becoming a chief judge never crossed my mind, not even in the wildest dream. He made his instrument, His Excellency, the Governor of Rivers State, Chief Barrister Nyesom Ezenwo-Wike, CON, GSSRS, POS Africa, who has a determined heart and does not discriminate.
Meanwhile, Governor Nyesom Wike, himself a life bencher, uses the opportunity to clear the air on the controversial issue of financial autonomy for the judiciary.
The issues in contention do not apply at all to Rivers State, where the judiciary is enjoying and continues to enjoy financial autonomy and much improved staff welfare. Now, the NBA, they are happy that they've joined them, that they've agreed that they should go on strike. I have no problems about that. You've heard what the retiring Chief Judge said. When you see what politics, how politics comes, these people who came to us and told me they never knew that they are enjoying financial autonomy, and told me before the governor that they are going back to reopen the gates so that the courts can operate. As I speak today, they all have vanished.
Despite the ongoing strike by the judicial staff of Nigeria, the ceremonial courtroom of the Chief Judge of Rivers State is full to capacity with serving and retired senior judicial officers from across the country, Rivers State government officials and well-wishers to celebrate a woman described as bold, fearless and courageous.
The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the effort by African leaders to combat the scourge was the thrust of a dialogue organized by the United Bank for Africa to commemorate the 2021 Africa Day. Speakers at the virtual event, including the President of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, are confident that with resilience and strong partnership between the public and private sector, COVID-19 will be tackled effectively.
Priority for Africa.
The UBA Africa Day conversation, moderated by the group chairman of the UBA and founder of the Tony Elumelu Foundation, Mr. Tony Elumelu, comes on the heel of a number of issues, including the COVID-19 pandemic, which has piled up pressure on the African economy.
Priority for Africa must be empowering our youth and ensuring the creation of jobs and economic opportunity even during very, very difficult times.
Although the scale of devastation from the pandemic in Africa is less compared to other regions, the impact is still being felt.
You can't give what you don't have.
President Paul Kagame of Rwanda believes resilience and partnership is required to sustain the fight against COVID-19.
We are counting on our continent's resilience to see us through this crisis. Partnerships are also important. For example, we are working together as a continent with partners to build Africa's vaccine manufacturing capacity. But we can also learn from this shock to invest much more of our budgets in our national health systems.
So far, Africa has administered over 25 million doses, or 1.5% of the global total. This is seen as an unjust distribution of vaccine doses.
If we are to recover sustainably from this crisis, we have to correct the vaccine inequity that is so evident in the world today. The fact that we have vaccinated so little of our population is not acceptable.
WHO is working day in and day out to bring immediate solutions for the equitable distribution of vaccine doses. But it's clear that Africa cannot rely solely on imports of vaccines from the rest of the world. WHO is also working with the African Union to establish the African Medicines Agency.
Africa Day has been celebrated since May the 25th, 1963, across the African continent and worldwide. The day was inaugurated by the African Union in celebration of the unity, diversity, and beauty of Africa and its people.
Lafarge Africa PLC, a major player in the Nigerian cement market and construction industry, has held its 62nd annual general meeting in Lagos. The company declared the payment of 16.11 billion naira to its shareholders as a final dividend for the period ended 31st December 2020.
On COVID-19.
It's time for Lafarge Africa PLC's board of directors to give account of stewardship to its shareholders and investors. Lafarge Africa is on a growth trajectory. Its revenue grew year-on-year by 8% from 2019 to 2020. And in the same financial year, the company's profit after tax rose by 99%. The other metrics are also in the positives.
I still have to welcome you to this board. As our chairman, I wish you a successful tenure.
The shareholders react to the company's financial standing and also commend its sustainable initiatives.
Declaration of dividend.
The chairman declares the dividend recommended by the board and puts the motion up for voting.
I hereby move that a dividend of 1 naira per ordinary share amounting to 16,107,795,721 naira be paid in respect of the year ended 31st December 2020.
It's time to vote. The shareholders are expected to vote on payment of dividend, approval of auditors and directors' remuneration, elect members of the audit committee, among other resolutions.
We are very delighted with a very, very impressive financial performance during this pandemic period. It is to our delight that we have been paid, not only being paid, and we are also given an expectation for a good future.
The company's management and board say it will continue to deliver on its promises to shareholders and investors.
The company focus is to be in a sold-out situation, and we can sell all what we can produce. So that's what we focus on.
We are assiduously committed, the management and the board, to making sure that we give an improved result to all our stakeholders. This includes our staff, include our shareholders, and include the community of Nigeria.
Lafarge Africa has a wide range of cement solutions designed to meet all production and construction needs. The company says it will continue to conduct its business without losing sight of its sustainable development initiatives in the areas of circular economy, climate, community, and environment.
That's all from Abuja. Now to Anne for business news.
Linda. Let's begin business news with the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation signing agreements with its oil mining lease 118 partners to unlock over $10 billion of investment in the country's deep water operation. At a historic signing ceremony today, the GMD of NNPC, Mr. Mele Kyari, says the long-standing dispute that has bedeviled the production sharing contract partners has been settled with the adoption of clearly aligned terms. The NNPC signed the 20-year deal with Shell Nigeria ExxonMobil Nigeria, Total Nigeria, and Eni's Nigerian AGM Oil Company.
It introduces value to all of us by having in line of sight investment, even for the Bonga South, at around $13 billion, immediate income for government in the excess of $780 million, opportunity to dissolve long-standing dispute with contingent liabilities exceeding over $9 billion for all of us, and ultimately seeing growth in our country, where investments will come in from other assets, not just on the deep water, but even for new investors. It is an opportunity for them to see that this country is ready for business, and we are very grateful.
The Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, has been explaining the adoption of the Nigerian Autonomous Foreign Exchange Rate methodology at its official window for exchange rate. Speaking to journalists after the two-day Monetary Policy Committee meeting in Abuja, Mr. Emefiele says the Apex Bank is constantly monitoring the forex market and it will continue to intervene where necessary.
We found out that we were no longer dealing in this so-called CBN official rate. All transactions are benchmarked against the NFX. I had read in some places where some said, oh, it's because we had depreciated the currency or stuff and all that. And I came out and said, we did not depreciate the currency. The market, Nigeria still operates a managed float regime where CBN will observe the market. As it deems fit, depending on its direction or where it thinks the market will be, will intervene in the market to control exchange rate in the market. That's what we're doing.
The local equities market added up some losses in today's trading session, with the benchmark index easing more today by 0.08%. Layo Adegoke has the details.
Thank you for joining us for the Stock Market Report. You might be familiar with the popular Wall Street adage, sell in May and go away. But this time, it's turning out to be sell in May and remain there. Now, this is because the downturn at the equities market, which has dominated the better part of the month, enters a second day in the week, no thanks to the absence of major foreign investors. Well, a fresh round of sell pressure by profit takers pushed the benchmark indicator of equities performance further down by 0.08% decline, closer to the 37,000 lower level at the close of today's trading. And this is largely attributed to some key banking and insurance sector components. Although the equities market is currently facing weakening interest by local investors and may have defied the CBN MPC's latest rates decision to keep interest rates unchanged, traders say there is still a possibility for a quick rebound from bargain hunters in the coming days. That's it on the Stock Market Report. I'm Layo Adegoke.
And that's business news for tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Anne Nwawado. It's back to you, Amarachi.
Banking so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thanks, Anne. Leading member of Mali's M5 RFB group, which spearheaded protests last year that led to the overthrow of Malian President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, says the group has been asked to put forward a candidate to become the country's next prime minister. Soya Digui's revelation comes as French President Emmanuel Macron promises EU sanctions on Mali following the arrest of interim president and prime minister by the military vice president in the transitional government, Colonel Assimi Goïta, who blames the leaders for failing to avert nationwide strikes and accusing them of sabotaging the country's transition. Simon Pusey has more international news in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Several European airlines have said that they will not fly over Belarus days after a dissident journalist was arrested on a flight diverted to Minsk. Air France is the latest major carrier to ban overflights. Neighbouring Ukraine and Poland are stopping all flights to and from Belarus. Western countries accuse Belarus of hijacking the Ryanair plane carrying journalist Roman Protasevich on Sunday. The Greece-Lithuania flight was rerouted over a supposed bomb threat. Mr. Protasevich faces charges relating to his reporting of last August's disputed election and subsequent crackdown on mass opposition protests. Mali's vice president has said he removed the president and prime minister because they violated the terms of the transition by not consulting him on cabinet changes. Assimi Goïta said that President Bardour and Prime Minister Mokhtar Ouane have been stripped of their powers and promised elections in 2022. Bardour and Mokhtar Ouane are thought to have been detained by soldiers and driven to a military camp near the capital Bamako. The two men have been leading an interim government which took power after a military coup last August. The African Union, the EU and the US have all called for their release. The US Secretary of State has pledged to help rebuild Gaza as part of efforts to bolster a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel.
You took a bold position, clear position.
In part of a Middle East mission, Antony Blinken also made clear that the United States intended to ensure that Hamas, which it regards as a terrorist organization, does not benefit from humanitarian aid. The Secretary of State began his regional visit in Jerusalem, where he held talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Speaking to reporters with Mr. Blinken on his side, Mr. Netanyahu threatened a very powerful response if Hamas renewed cross-border rocket strikes. The truce, brokered by Egypt and coordinated with the United States, began last Friday after 11 days of fighting. Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary has said Tokyo believes there is no change in US support for holding the Olympics, despite its issuing a do not travel advisory for Japan. Mr. Kato also said that the Japanese government has received an explanation from the United States that the decision is not related to the dispatch of the athletes. The new guidance by the US Center for Disease Control and Prevention says travelers should avoid all travel to Japan. In Peru, leftist Shining Path militants have killed at least 14 people, including 2 children in a remote region of the country known for cocoa production. Peru says the militant group responsible for one of Latin America's deadliest conflicts killed more than a dozen people over the weekend. The Justice Minister blamed rebels with the Shining Path for the massacre. Pamphlets were found at the site telling Peruvians not to vote on June the 6th. A Nepali Sherpa who scaled Mount Everest for a record 25th time earlier this month has arrived back in the capital of Kathmandu. Kami Rita Sherpa beat his own record on May the 7th after he ascended as part of a group that was the first to reach the summit in more than a year. There was a small crowd of supporters at the airport for his arrival. Kami, who goes by his first name, scaled the nearly 9,000-metre mountain via the traditional Southeast Ridge route with 11 other Sherpa climbers. He said he hoped his accomplishment represented something big for the whole country. And finally, city dwellers are learning how to keep wolves at bay in the mountains of eastern Switzerland, helping sheep and goat farmers protect their flocks. Around 100 wolves live in the wild in Switzerland and their numbers are rising. A referendum last year on whether to make it easier to shoot wolves deemed a threat to livestock exposed divergent attitudes towards the animals from urban voters keen on protecting wildlife and from rural voters who have to put up with the wolves. Under a programme called Voluntary Shepherds, city dwellers are learning practical skills such as putting up electrified fences in a correct way to keep sheep in and wolves out. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Many thanks, Simon. The Confederation of African Athletics, the CAA, has confirmed Lagos as the new host for the 21st CAA Athletics Championships from June the 23rd to the 27th. The CAA President Hamad Malboum says that the championships will take place at the Teslim Balogun Stadium with auxiliary support to be provided at the National Stadium Surulere and the Yaba College of Technology. The Polish city of Gdansk is getting ready to host Wednesday's Europa League final between Villarreal and Manchester United. The final will be allowed to host up to 9,500 spectators at the Stadion Miedzecki, with both finalists receiving 2,000 tickets each and 2,000 tickets to be offered to the general public. Manchester United manager Ole Gunnar Solskjaer believes winning the Europa League final could be a stepping stone for further success for the club. Man United are yet to win any silverware since Solskjaer took charge of the club in December 2018, having previously lost in 4 semi-finals. UEFA has announced that up to 16,500 spectators will be allowed to attend the Champions League final in Porto on Saturday, with the opening of ticket sales. The figure permitted by the Portuguese authorities is 1/3 of the capacity of the Estadio do Dragão, which took over hosting the final in mid-May after Istanbul was ruled out by COVID-19 problems. Now, the German Football Association, the DFB, has announced that outgoing Bayern Munich coach Hansi Flick will succeed his former boss Joachim Löw in the German dugout after next month's Euro Championships. Flick has signed a 3-year contract with the German Football Association to succeed Löw. That sports news is back to you, Marachi.
Thanks, Ayatunde. And the main news again. The Accountant General of the Federation today told the House of Representatives that recovered looted funds have been returned to states as he is grilled alongside Attorney General of the Federation over alleged missing funds. That is the news at 10 tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Good night and stay safe.